Okay, this is currently being filmed at 5 o'clock in the morning, but I felt like after I finished the book, it was a great time to actually do this, get it right off the press after I just finished it. Just finished Bram Stoker's Dracula for the project here, and besides it being a really good read, I guess I can start with my first reactions with the book. So after I finished it, I may have not skimmed a little bit of it because it was a lot of fluff. It was a really good read. It was really hearty with stuff. And did I see myself in that book at all? Not really, to say the least. Maybe in a character or two, like character traits, but not like a full character. Um, if I learned a lesson at the end, it's more or less sticking up for yourself and really just it's like one of the very first road trips with buddies to stop an evil. It really is. And if I remembered anything from the past that I've forgotten, clearly this story itself relates back to remembering things that you can suppress, and it's really just interesting how he writes it. And if I was inspired by this book, it was just how he wrote it. With all the journal, like it being journal entries and stuff like that, it was really interesting to see someone tell a story just by just the characters' like their knowing of the events that are happening and the perception of it. And well, what I learned that I didn't know before, Old English. I looked up plenty of things for it because this book was written back in like 1897, I believe, or was published back then, and it was using a lot of Old English and a lot of things that were relevant to that time that were invented at that time. So I had to do some research to really know what these words meant. Um, and I kind of want to do what next one it would be the plot setting and mechanics. So this is set in multiple different areas around Europe. This is set in the east, I believe, the eastern part of Europe with Transylvania, like all those Slavic countries. Then you go to London in France, like England, for the second half, and then you go back to Transylvania at the end because they're pretty much just hunting down um Dracula, and that's pretty much the main areas. I can't like really list down all of them because it would take forever because this story does bounce through a lot of locations. Like Van Helsing comes from Germany, I believe. He's German, and you can tell because he uses German words throughout the entirety of the story. Um, the time period of this is set when the book was written, pretty much. It was set around that time with the same technology of that time. The environment was heavily Christianity. It was heavy, like a lot of crosses, like the crucifix. There was a lot of mention of it. Um, the morale was actually pretty well most of round. There was a lot of like good character, like the morale was pretty good unless Dracula was around, and like then it was like a little bit more dim and not so. But the characters always like found the way to look at the bright side. Um, in the character list. The major characters would be Jonathan Harker, his then wife Mia Murphy slash Harker. Lisa's a little bit of a main character, or yeah, Lisa. She dies unfortunately as one of the plot relevances of the story. Then we got a lot of the other characters like Quincy. Arthur's a main character for a little bit. You got Van Helsing, which is just an absolute amazing character that was written. You got plenty of other characters. Mostly the personality traits are really Mia Murphy was really interesting as she was written as a very supportive female character who was never shunned out of anything, and actually people treated her with respect, which was very interesting for the time period that this book was written. Jonathan Harker was probably one of my favorites because the first 5 chapters of this book alone really highlight that character and how he is able to pick up on things really fast. And then you got Van Helsing's character, which is just he's really good. He's German and he knows who this is. He knows Dracula, and it's very interesting to see how he deals with this entirety of this scenario. It's really nice. Um, um, yeah. And then like the plot, if I were to sum it up in about 50 words, it's um, it's a bunch of journal entries that are relating to each character's experiences with Dracula, and over the course of the story, each of these characters meet up pretty much. They are fighting under one cause, and their goal is to kill Dracula. Like that's the base plot of it. The major climax actually doesn't happen till like 5 pages, like towards the end of the book. If you really want to see where that was the major conflict, is like 10 pages to the end of the book, which is really interesting. Because if you really want to see where the major conflict comes in, you like the stakes are raised high when Jonathan Harker's wife is gonna turn, and they have to like find Dracula and kill him. um, so also reoccurring events in this story, again, it would relate back to Mia and Lisa. Lisa got bit by Dracula. She dies, but Mia doesn't because they're able to kill Dracula in time. In the ending, I didn't catch on at first. I had to reread it, but Quincy does die, and it surprised me because I never thought that this story would then again kill one of the main characters. But I was actually really surprised, and it was a really good ending because they ended off in this such a good scene that they describe. Like again, this what how he wrote it alone was phenomenal. Um, and I kind of want to summarize like the main part of the book. Like I said earlier, the first 5 chapters alone are phenomenal. They set up the story really well, and memorable open, like it's a memorable opening. Like I think the climb up to Dracula's castle with the blue flame is pretty notable because it really just sets you into that mood of this is not a normal place. um and I want to do some for the very last part of this, some memorable lines and scenes, and I want to relate back to the very ending scene, the very last scene of the book, where Quincy is staring up at Castle Dracula when the sun, I believe, is setting, and he's like, it's a glorious sight to him because that's his final scene before he dies. That's the final thing he remembers, and it's so glorious because they work so hard for something that is notable. Another notable scene I would say is anything to do with the main guy, the psychiatric patient that's in the mental hospital throughout the entirety of the story. I think his name is Henry. I think his name is Henry, but I could be honestly wrong on that one. Anything to do with him is very interesting and how he is written. I love that stuff. Like when it has to do with mental, it's very interesting on how they always tackle it. And I love when they do it right. You can easily screw that up any what wrong. Um, and I guess I'm more describing the style, aren't I? I meant to really go for the style there because, again, the ending there, the shot at the end was glorious because how he described it as the sun, the blazing sun. Then you got like other styles that he chose, using really complicated words to describe certain scenes. There's a lot in the story that I can describe. Anytime he describes the night with the midnight and the bright moon, anything to do with Lisa sleepwalking. You got when he describes Castle Dracula from afar and with the blue flame. The snowy mountains are also great. And the structure of the story alone is interesting, as in it starts with just the base characters' journal entries, then it jumps to like news articles, then his fiance, and so on and so forth, until the end where it's a note from the author, I believe, or a note from one of the characters, which I think is Jonathan Harker. And, well, that's about it that I really want to describe about this book. It was a very good read, and I actually am willing to read it again just because there's so much I didn't pick up on, I may pick up on a second read.